He built an empire on silence and fear. She was the only voice that ever broke through. 6 years ago, he walked away, never knowing she carried his bloodline. Now, trapped at 35,000 feet on a honeymoon that feels like a funeral, he sees them. 3 children, his eyes staring back at him from across the aisle. His new wife sleeps, unaware that the man beside her just discovered he's a father. Some secrets don't stay buried. Some loves don't stay quiet. And some men realize too late that power means nothing when you've lost everything that mattered. This is the story of a crime lord who thought he controlled fate, until fate sat him in row 12 and put his past in row 23. Hello, everyone. I'm back with another Afro-Korean story that will break your heart and put it back together. Today's tale is about secrets that travel at 35,000 feet and love that refuses to stay buried. But before we dive in, please help me reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support means everything, and together we're building something beautiful. Now, let's begin this journey, and don't forget to subscribe. He didn't believe in fate. Fate was for weak men who needed excuses for their failures. Kang Min-seok built his empire on calculated risks, cold decisions, and the kind of silence that made grown men confess sins they hadn't even committed yet. But fate, it seemed, had a sense of irony. The private jet hummed beneath him. Custom leather, Italian champagne chilling in crystal glasses, his new wife's head resting against his shoulder like a declaration of ownership. Yuna. Beautiful. Connected. The daughter of a political dynasty that made his criminal empire look almost legitimate in comparison. Their marriage was strategy dressed in white lace. He felt nothing when he kissed her at the altar. Nothing when her father shook his hand with eyes that calculated profit margins. Nothing now, as they flew toward some Mediterranean island where he'd pretend to be a man capable of romance. Min-seok had perfected the art of feeling nothing. Until he saw her. Row 23. The boarding door was still open, late passengers filtering in with that particular anxiety of people who've been running through airports. He wasn't paying attention, had learned long ago that ordinary people didn't concern him. Then she walked past first class. Amara. The name hit him like a bullet he didn't see coming. 6 years dissolved in the 3 seconds it took her to move through his peripheral vision. He didn't turn his head. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. But every nerve in his body screamed recognition. She looked different. Her hair was pulled back in a simple bun. Exhaustion painted shadows beneath those eyes he used to trace with his thumb at 3 a.m., when the world felt small enough to fit in her studio apartment. She wore jeans and a sweater that had seen better days, carrying 2 small backpacks and holding— his heart stopped. A child's hand. No. 3 children's hands. Triplets. He watched, frozen in a way that would have gotten him killed in his line of work, as she maneuvered 3 identical 5-year-olds down the aisle. 2 boys and a girl. They moved with that chaotic energy of children who'd been told to behave but were losing the battle against their own curiosity. The boy in the middle looked directly at him. Min-seok's reflection stared back. Same dark eyes. Same serious expression that didn't belong on a child's face. Same way of observing everything while revealing nothing. His son. The word formed without permission. His son. And if one was his, then— "Baby, you okay?" Yuna's voice cut through his spiral. She shifted against his shoulder, her perfectly manicured hand sliding over his. "You're tense." He forced his muscles to relax, forced his face into the mask he'd worn since he was 16, and learned that showing emotion got people killed. Fine, just thinking about work. The lie tasted like ash. Yuna accepted it with a sleepy smile, settling back against him. She had no idea that her husband had just discovered fatherhood in the economy section of an airplane. Min-seok couldn't look away from row 23. Amara was buckling the children into their seats with practiced efficiency. The little girl, his daughter, some primal part of him insisted, was chattering about clouds. One of the boys had already pulled out a coloring book. The serious one, the one with Min-seok's eyes, sat perfectly still, watching his mother with an intensity that made Min-seok's chest hurt. She'd been pregnant. When he ended things 6 years ago, when his father's assassination had pulled him into a war for control of the organization, when he'd decided that loving someone was a liability he couldn't afford, she'd been carrying his children. 3 of them. And she never told him. The question burned. Why? But he knew why. He'd ended it with the kind of finality that left no room for conversations. Had changed his number, moved into the compound, became the man his father had groomed him to be. Untouchable, unreachable, unforgiving. She must have tried. Must have stood outside the gates of his new life, carrying 3 pieces of him inside her body, and been turned away by men who didn't care about anything except their boss's orders. The plane began to taxi. Min-seok's new wife slept against his shoulder. His old love buckled their children, his children, into seats 20 rows behind him. And for the first time in 6 years, the crime lord who controlled half of New York's underground didn't know what the hell to do. The flight attendant brought champagne. Min-seok stared at the golden liquid and saw accusation. Every bubble rising to the surface felt like a memory he'd tried to drown. Amara's laugh. The way she said his name like it meant something beyond fear. The morning he'd left her apartment for the last time, watching her sleep, knowing he'd never come back, knowing it would destroy her, not knowing it would destroy him too. To us, Yuna murmured, clinking her glass against his. He drank, tasted nothing. Across the aisle, a businessman typed aggressively on his laptop. Behind him, someone watched a movie with headphones that leaked tinny dialogue. Normal people, living normal lives, not sitting 3 meters away from a woman who'd given birth to your children while you were busy becoming a monster. Min-seok pulled out his phone, pretended to check emails. What he actually did: calculate sightlines. If he stood to use the bathroom, he'd have to pass row 23. Could walk past without acknowledging her. Could see the children up close. Could confirm what his gut already knew: that those 3 kids carried his DNA, his legacy, his bloodline in a way that had nothing to do with criminal empires and everything to do with something he'd thought he'd killed inside himself. Love. The word felt foreign, dangerous. He'd loved Amara once. Loved her in that reckless way of young men who haven't yet learned that caring about someone gives the universe a target. She'd been a dancer back then, modern dance, the kind that made poetry out of pain. He'd met her at some gallery opening his father had forced him to attend. She'd looked at him and seen him. Not the air. Not the weapon being sharpened. Just Min-seok. 26 years old and already tired of blood. They'd had 2 years. 2 years of stolen mornings and whispered futures. 2 years of her trying to pull him toward light while his world dragged him into darkness. 2 years of him believing, foolishly, that maybe he could be both, her man and his father's son. Then his father died in a restaurant, choking on his own blood while rival families celebrated. And Min-seok had to choose. He chose power, chose survival, chose to become exactly what his father had built him to be. He told himself it was mercy, walking away from Amara before his world swallowed her whole. Turned out mercy looked a lot like cowardice when you were staring at its consequences in row 23. The little girl, his daughter, dropped her coloring book. Min-seok watched Amara bend down to retrieve it, her movements gentle even in exhaustion. She said something that made the girl giggle. The sound carried through the cabin, innocent and bright, and it hurt worse than any bullet he'd ever taken. He had a daughter, 2 sons, a family, and a wife sleeping against his shoulder who represented everything except what he actually wanted. Min-seok? Yuna stirred, blinking up at him with eyes still soft from sleep. You've been staring at your phone for 10 minutes. What's wrong? Everything, he thought. Nothing, he said. Go back to sleep. She studied him for a moment. Yuna wasn't stupid. Had survived political warfare since childhood. But whatever she saw in his face, she decided not to push. Smart woman. It's why he'd chosen her. Chosen. That word again. As if life was just a series of strategic decisions and not this chaotic mess of consequence and coincidence and children who had his eyes. The plane hit turbulence. Minor. Nothing concerning. But the little girl yelped, and Min-seok watched Amara instantly pull all 3 children close, her body a shield, protecting them. The way she'd once tried to protect him from himself. He'd failed her in every way that mattered. And now he was watching her raise his children alone, while he pretended to honeymoon with a woman he'd never love. The turbulence passed. Amara relaxed, smoothing her daughter's hair, whispering reassurances. The serious boy, Min-seok decided to call him that until he learned his actual name, watched his mother with absolute trust. Did they know about him? Had she told them their father existed somewhere in the world? Or were they growing up thinking he'd never wanted them? The thought made him nauseous. His phone buzzed. Real email this time. His second in command, updating him on territory disputes that suddenly felt incredibly unimportant. Men posturing over streets and profit margins while Min-seok's entire understanding of his life rearranged itself in an airplane cabin. He typed a response. Approved a meeting. Made decisions that would affect hundreds of people. And couldn't stop watching Row 23. Couldn't stop doing the math. 5-year-olds meant she'd been about 6 months pregnant when he'd walked away. Had she been showing? Had he been so consumed by war and strategy that he'd missed his own children growing inside her? Yes. The answer was yes. He'd been so focused on becoming untouchable that he'd failed to see what actually mattered. Yuna's breathing evened out again. The cabin lights dimmed for the long flight ahead. And Min-seok sat in first class, trapped between the woman who wore his ring and the woman who'd given him everything he never knew he needed. Some prisons, he realized, you build yourself. This one was 35,000 feet in the air with no escape route except truth. And truth was the one weapon he'd never learned to use. 3 hours into the flight, his daughter started crying. Not the angry tantrum kind. The exhausted, overwhelmed kind that made Amara's face crumple with worry. Min-seok watched her try everything. Gentle words, a stuffed animal, promises of treats when they landed. Nothing worked. The businessman across the aisle shot them an annoyed look. Min-seok's hand tightened on his armrest. Old instincts. Protective rage at anyone who made Amara's life harder. He had to physically stop himself from standing up, walking back there, and suggesting the businessman find a new expression before he lost the ability to make any. Poor thing, Yuna murmured, watching the scene with detached sympathy. Traveling with triplets alone must be impossible. Alone. The word hung between them like an accusation. Min-seok managed. He should tell her. Should explain that the crying child 20 rows back was his daughter. That he'd just discovered fatherhood somewhere over the Atlantic. That their entire marriage was already a lie. But this particular lie felt heavier than all the others combined. But Yuna came from a world where image was everything, and scandal was death. Her family had chosen him specifically because his criminal empire was discreet, powerful, and untouchable. A secret family? Children he'd abandoned? That wasn't discreet. That was ammunition for every enemy they had. So he stayed silent. Watched Amara finally calm their daughter. Their daughter, the pronoun felt surreal, with a combination of patience and exhaustion that made him hate himself more with each passing second. The little girl settled against her mother's chest, hiccuping softly. Amara looked utterly drained, and still beautiful. Still her. Still the woman who'd once traced his scars and told him they made him real, not ruined. He'd told her she was naive. Turned out he was the naive one, thinking he could walk away from love and not leave pieces of himself scattered behind him. The serious boy was watching him. Min-seok froze. Across 20 rows, through dimmed cabin lighting, his son stared at him with an intensity that didn't belong on a 5-year-old's face. Observant. Calculating. Reading the room the way Min-seok had learned to do before he could properly read books. Did the boy recognize something? Some genetic echo that whispered family even without context? Or was Min-seok projecting? Desperate to believe that blood called to blood even when you'd spent 6 years pretending it didn't exist. The boy didn't look away. Neither did Min-seok. It was his son who broke first, turning to tug on Amara's sleeve, whispering something Min-seok couldn't hear. Amara glanced up. Their eyes met. The world stopped. She froze. Absolute stillness. The kind that comes from recognizing a threat or a ghost, or the man who'd destroyed you 6 years ago and now sat in first class with another woman's head on his shoulder. Min-seok saw the exact moment she processed his presence. Shock. Then fear. Then something worse than anger. Resignation. Like she'd always known this moment would come, and had spent 6 years preparing for how much it would hurt. He wanted to mouth something. I didn't know. I'm sorry. They're beautiful. But what came out what his face did without permission, was the mask. The crime lord expression that revealed nothing and promised violence if you looked too close. Amara's face shuddered. She looked away first, pulled her children closer, became a wall between him and them. And Min Seok understood. She thought he knew. Thought he'd known about the pregnancy, and chosen this life anyway. Chose power and strategy and a woman like Yuna over her and their children. He wanted to stand up, walk back there. Explain that he was an idiot and a coward, but not that kind of monster. That he would have what? Left his empire? Walked away from 6 years of blood and strategy? Become a father instead of a crime lord? The honest answer terrified him. Because he didn't know. Didn't know if 26-year-old Min Seok, drowning in his father's legacy, would have chosen differently even with the truth. And that made him exactly the monster Amara thought he was. Bathroom, he muttered to Yuna, extracting himself carefully. She mumbled acknowledgement without fully waking. He stood, straightened his jacket, walked down the aisle with the measured pace of a man who'd learned to control every micro-expression, every hint of vulnerability. Row 23 approached. Amara's back was to the aisle, deliberate. She'd positioned herself as a shield, the way she used to position her body between him and his nightmares when he'd wake up choking on violence. The children were all asleep now, small mercies, curled against their mother, like she was the only safe harbor in a dangerous world. She was right about that, at least. Min Seok passed them. Didn't stop. Didn't speak. Didn't do anything except walk past the family he'd never known he had and lock himself in the airplane bathroom like a coward. He gripped the sink, stared at his reflection. Same face that had stared back at him from his son's features. Same dark eyes. Same genetic legacy that had nothing to do with criminal empires and everything to do with 3 children sleeping in row 23. His phone buzzed. Message from his security team about the honeymoon villa. Everything prepared. Privacy guaranteed. Romance package arranged. He wanted to laugh. Wanted to scream. Wanted to go back in time and make different choices, though he honestly didn't know which choices to change. Meeting Amara? Loving her? Leaving her? Building an empire on the bones of his father's vision? All of it. None of it. Someone knocked on the door. Impatient passenger needing the bathroom. Min Seok splashed water on his face, composed himself, became the man everyone expected. Walked back to his seat. Amara didn't look at him this time, but her eldest son, the serious one, watched him pass with eyes that knew something, even if he didn't have words for it yet. Min Seok settled back into first class. Yuna reached for his hand without waking. And somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, the crime lord who'd built an empire on calculated decisions realized he'd just made the worst calculation of his life. Not 6 years ago when he walked away. Now. This moment. Choosing silence. Choosing to land on some Mediterranean island and pretend to be a honeymooner, while his actual family flew toward whatever life Amara had built without him. The plane pushed through clouds. Below, the ocean stretched endless and dark. And Min Seok sat trapped between 2 women. One who owned his present, one who owned every part of him that still remembered how to feel. Some lines once crossed, you can't uncross. But some lines, he was realizing, you never actually left behind. They just waited for fate to put you on the same airplane. And force you to see exactly what you'd lost. The plane landed in Athens at dawn. Min Seok had spent 7 hours pretending to sleep, while his mind calculated impossible equations. Every scenario ended the same way, with him choosing between the empire he'd bled for and 3 children who didn't know his name. There was no good answer. Only devastating ones. Yuna stretched beside him, already pulling out her phone to document their arrival. She was good at that, performing happiness for an audience that expected perfection. He understood the impulse, had been performing his entire life, just different roles for different stages. Ready for paradise? She asked, smiling that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. He nodded, helped her with their carry-ons. Played the attentive husband while his peripheral vision tracked row 23. Amara was struggling with 3 exhausted children and too much luggage. The serious boy tried to help, dragging a backpack almost as big as he was. The other boy had fallen back asleep against his sister, both of them dead weight in their mother's arms. No one offered to help her. The businessman who'd glared at them earlier pushed past without acknowledgement. Other passengers formed a river around her, focused on their own destinations, their own lives. Minsuk's hands clenched. Old instincts. Protective fury that had nothing to do with strategy, and everything to do with watching the woman he'd loved struggle alone with the children he'd helped create. Minsuk? Yuna's voice held a question. He forced himself to turn away, to follow his wife down the jet bridge, to enter the airport terminal like a man on his honeymoon, instead of a man whose entire world had just fractured. But he looked back once, caught Amara's eyes across the deplaning crowd. This time, she didn't look away, didn't hide, just stared at him with an expression that held 6 years of survival, 6 years of raising his children alone, 6 years of loving someone who disappeared like smoke. Then she shifted her daughter's weight, took both boys' hands, and walked in the opposite direction. Away from him. Always away from him. And he let her go. Again. The villa was obscene. Infinity pool overlooking the Aegean. White marble everything. Staff that appeared and disappeared like well-trained ghosts. The kind of luxury that cost more per night than most people earned in months. Yuna loved it immediately. Posed for photos. Posted stories. Performed the honeymoon with professional efficiency. Minsuk stood on the balcony and thought about row 23. "You're distracted," Yuna said, appearing beside him with 2 glasses of wine. "You've been distracted since we boarded the plane. He should lie. Should deflect. Should use one of the 1,000 techniques he'd mastered for avoiding uncomfortable truths. Instead, he asked, 'Do you want children?' She blinked. Recovered quickly. Political training. Eventually. When it makes sense strategically. Why? Strategically. The word tasted like poison. Just thinking about the future. Well, don't think too hard. She clinked her glass against his. We have 2 weeks to not think about anything except this view and each other. 2 weeks in paradise while somewhere in Athens, Amara was checking into whatever budget hotel she could afford, settling 3 exhausted children into beds, being both mother and father because he'd failed at the latter without even knowing the role existed. His phone buzzed, his second in command again. Crisis brewing back home. Rival family making moves while he was gone. Perfect timing. "I need to make a call," he told Yuna. She sighed but didn't argue. She'd known what she was marrying. A man whose empire didn't respect honeymoons or business hours or anything except power. He walked inside. Dialed. "Boss." His second's voice was clipped. "We've got a problem." Minsuk listened to the details. Territorial dispute. Broken agreement. The kind of thing that required his particular brand of problem-solving. He should care. Should feel the familiar rush of strategy. The cold calculation of how to break someone without technically breaking any treaties. Instead, he felt nothing. "Handle it," he said. Silence. Then, "Boss, this requires your direct..." I said handle it. You have full authority. Don't call me again unless someone's dying. He hung up before his second could respond. Stood in the ridiculously opulent living room of his honeymoon villa, and realized something terrifying. He didn't want to be here. Didn't want the empire. Didn't want the strategic marriage or the blood-soaked legacy or any of it. He wanted Row 23. Wanted to know his children's names. Wanted to hear his daughter's laugh without it breaking his heart. Wanted to see if his sons had inherited anything from him besides his eyes and his tendency toward silence. Wanted Amara to look at him like she used to, like he was worth saving. Everything okay? Yuna appeared in the doorway, backlit by Mediterranean sunset. "Fine," he lied. "Just business." She studied him with those sharp political eyes. "You know, my father warned me that you'd never really be present. That men like you are married to power first, everything else second. Your father's a smart man." "He is." She moved closer, all grace and calculated charm. "But I didn't marry you for love, Minsuk. I married you for alliance, for stability, for the future our families can build together. Honest, at least. And if I wanted something different?" The question escaped before he could stop it. Yuna's expression shifted. Not anger, curiosity. Different how? He couldn't answer. Couldn't explain that somewhere in the city, his past was breathing, and his future had his eyes, and he was stuck in this beautiful prison pretending none of it mattered. "Never mind," he said. But Yuna wasn't stupid. There was a woman on the plane, economy section. You couldn't stop watching her. His blood went cold. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." She wasn't accusing, just observing. "You looked at her the way my father looks at my mother when he thinks no one's watching. Like she's the only real thing in a world of performance." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Yuna sighed. "I won't ask who she is. Won't demand explanations. But Minseok?" She met his eyes. "Whatever she was to you, she's your past. I'm your present. Our family's alliance is your future. Don't confuse the three." She left him standing there. Returned to the balcony to watch sunset over water that stretched toward horizons neither of them would ever reach. And Minseok realized he'd married someone exactly like him. Practical, strategic, fundamentally alone even when surrounded by people. His phone buzzed again. Not his second this time. A message from an unknown number. His heart stopped. The message was simple. A photo. 3 children asleep on a hotel bed, curled together like puppies. And beneath it, 2 words. "They're safe." Amara. She'd contacted him. After 6 years of silence, she'd reached out with proof of life, proof of safety, proof that she knew he'd seen them and was probably losing his mind. He stared at the photo. His sons. His daughter. Real. Alive. His. Another message appeared. "Don't come looking. We're fine without you. We've always been fine without you." The words were meant to hurt. They worked. But beneath the pain was something else. Gratitude. She'd given him proof they existed. Proof they were okay. Proof that she'd managed to build a life, raise 3 children, survive without him. Proof she was stronger than he'd ever been. He typed a response, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. What could he possibly say? "I didn't know." True, but insufficient. "I'm sorry?" Meaningless after 6 years. "I want to meet them?" Selfish when she'd made it clear they didn't need him. Finally, he sent 3 words. "What are their names?" The response took 10 minutes. Long enough that he thought she wouldn't answer. Long enough that he paced the villa like a caged animal while Yuna sipped wine on the balcony, pretending not to notice her husband unraveling. Then, "That's not information you've earned. Fair. Devastating, but fair." Another message. "Enjoy your honeymoon, Minseok. Enjoy your empire. Enjoy your new life. We don't fit into any of it." Amara. "Don't. Just don't. You made your choice 6 years ago. I made mine. They don't know about you. They don't need to. Let us be." He stared at the screen until the words blurred. She was right. Completely. Utterly right. He'd walked away. Built a life without her. Married someone else. He had no right to disrupt whatever stability she'd created for their children. But knowing she was right didn't make it hurt less. Didn't make him want it less. Didn't change the fact that he'd just discovered the only thing in his entire life that mattered. And she was telling him to stay away. Yuna called from the balcony. "Dinner's ready." The chef made something special. He looked at his phone. At the photo of 3 sleeping children who would never call him father. Then at the balcony, where his wife waited with wine and strategy, and a future that felt like a tomb. Some choices you make once, but you pay for them forever. He couldn't eat. The chef had prepared something exquisite. Mediterranean fish, local wine, desserts that looked like art. Yuna ate with practiced elegance, chatting about tomorrow's plans. A boat tour, some archaeological site, shopping in Plaka. Minseok moved food around his plate and thought about impossible choices. His phone sat silent beside him. No new messages from Amara. She'd said what she needed to say and closed the door. Again. He deserved it. Knew he deserved it. But deserving pain didn't make it easier to swallow. "You're not even pretending to listen," Yuna observed, setting down her fork. "Sorry, I'm somewhere else." "I know." She studied him with that unsettling political intelligence. The woman from the plane. She messaged you. Not a question, an observation. He could lie, should lie. But something in Yuna's expression suggested she'd accept truth better than deception. Strategic honesty. They both understood that language. Yes. Is she why you've been different since boarding? Different. Careful word choice. Not broken, not destroyed, just different. It's complicated. Yuna laughed, sharp, knowing. It always is with the ones who matter. She poured more wine. Let me guess. Old flame. Never got closure. Seeing her reopened wounds you thought had scarred over. Close enough. Something like that. And now you're sitting here on your honeymoon, married to me, thinking about her. He met her eyes. Waited for anger, accusations, the kind of scene his world required. Instead, Yuna smiled sadly. I told you. I didn't marry you for love. My parents have been married 30 years, and I've never seen them actually look at each other. That's normal where I come from. Strategic partnerships dressed up as romance. She gestured between them. This is business. Very profitable business. But business nonetheless. Then why marry at all? Because women in my world don't get empires. We get married to them. No bitterness. Just fact. You offered stability, power, protection. I offered legitimacy, political connections, a face that photographs well for the society pages. It's a good deal. Sounds lonely. Says the crime lord who built walls so high he can't remember what exists outside them. She tilted her head. The woman on the plane. She got inside those walls once, didn't she? He didn't answer. Didn't need to. Yuna nodded. That's what I thought. And now she's here, in the same city. And you're wondering if you made a mistake 6 years ago. I made a lot of mistakes 6 years ago. But this one's the only one that keeps you awake at night. Truth. Silence settled between them. Not hostile. Almost understanding. Two people trapped in roles they'd chosen but never actually wanted. Finally, Yuna spoke again. I won't stop you. What? If you need to see her, talk to her. Get closure or whatever you're looking for. I won't stop you. She met his eyes. But I need you to understand something. Our marriage is a contract. Break it publicly, humiliate my family, and you'll find out exactly how ruthless political dynasties can be. A threat delivered with a smile. He respected that. I'm not planning to blow up our arrangement. Good. Then we understand each other. She stood, kissed his cheek with professional affection. I'm going to bed. You should do whatever you need to do. Just be discreet and be back before morning. Appearances matter. She left him alone with half-eaten food and a phone full of questions he didn't know how to ask. He lasted 30 minutes. Then he was in a car, driving toward Athens, following the location data his security team had pulled from Amara's message. Easy enough to track. She probably knew he would. Maybe that's why she'd sent it. The hotel was exactly what he'd expected. Budget-friendly, clean but worn. The kind of place where single mothers stayed when traveling with children on limited funds. His empire could buy this entire block without blinking. She was raising his children here while he slept on Italian sheets and complained about the emotional weight of strategic marriages. The hypocrisy tasted like poison. He sat in the car outside the hotel for an hour, watching windows, building courage, trying to figure out what the hell he thought he was doing. She'd told him to stay away. She'd been clear. And yet here he was, unable to let go of something he'd already lost, gambling everything on the slim chance that maybe, possibly, she'd listen if he explained. Explained what? That he hadn't known. True. But did it matter? He'd still left. Still chosen his empire over her. The pregnancy just made his choice more devastating, not less wrong. That he was sorry? Insufficient. Sorry didn't raise 3 children alone. Sorry didn't survive 6 years without him. That he wanted a second chance? That was the truth. The terrifying, selfish, impossible truth. He wanted a second chance at something he destroyed the first time. Wanted to meet his children. Learn their names. Hear them laugh without heartbreak attached. Wanted to see if Amara could ever forgive him. Wanted to see if he could forgive himself. His phone buzzed. Message from Yuna. Don't do anything stupid. Remember who you are." He stared at the message. Who was he? Crime lord, empire builder, strategic husband, his father's legacy made flesh. Or was he Minsok? The man who used to wake up at 3 a.m. and watch Amara sleep, terrified by how much he needed her. The man who'd believed briefly that love might be stronger than blood. The man who'd been wrong. He got out of the car, walked into the hotel lobby. The night clerk barely looked up, used to strange hours and stranger guests. Minsok found the stairs, climbed to the 3rd floor, stood outside room 307 like a ghost haunting his own life, raised his hand to knock. The door opened before he could. Amara stood there in an oversized t-shirt and exhaustion, backlit by the soft glow of a lamp. Behind her, 3 small shapes slept in one bed, tangled together like they were afraid of getting separated. "I knew you'd come," she said quietly. "You never could leave things alone." "Amara, don't." She stepped into the hallway, pulling the door almost closed behind her. "Don't say my name like it means something to you. Not anymore." They stood 3 feet apart. Might as well have been miles. She looked tired, beautiful, stronger than he remembered, and more fragile at the same time. Motherhood had carved new lines around her eyes, new steel in her spine. She'd survived him. He wasn't sure he'd survive this. "I didn't know," he said. The words came out rough, damaged. "About them. About any of it. I swear, Amara, I didn't know you were pregnant." She laughed, bitter, breaking. "And if you had? What would you have done differently? Stayed? Left your empire? Chosen us?" The honest answer sat between them like a bomb. "I don't know," he admitted. It broke something in her expression. "At least you're honest." She wrapped her arms around herself. "You want to know what I did when I found out? I stood outside your compound for 6 hours. Told your guards I needed to see you. They laughed. Said you'd moved on. That whatever girl I thought I was to you didn't exist anymore. Each word was a knife. I was 3 months pregnant. Could barely afford the hotel I was staying in. And your people turned me away like I was nothing. They didn't tell me because you'd told them not to. Because you'd burned that bridge so completely that even if I'd been dying, you wouldn't have known." Her eyes shone with tears she refused to shed. "So I raised them. Alone. Worked 3 jobs. Learned to be both parents. And they're incredible, Minsok. They're smart and funny and kind, and they don't need you. But I need them." Wrong thing to say. She recoiled like he'd struck her. "You need them? You need them?" Her voice rose, then dropped to a fierce whisper when she remembered sleeping children. "You don't get to need them. You don't get to walk back into our lives because fate put us on the same airplane and suddenly you're feeling paternal. That's not... They have a life. They have me. They have stability and love and everything they need without wondering why their father disappeared before they were born. Do they know about me?" Her expression shattered. Rebuilt. Became ice. They know their father was someone who left. That's all they need to know. The words hollowed him out. Somewhere in that room, his children were sleeping, dreaming child dreams, living lives he'd never be part of. "What are their names?" he asked again. Amara's jaw tightened. "Go back to your wife, Minsok. Go back to your empire. Forget you saw us." "I can't. You have to." "Amara, please." "Please what?" Tears finally broke free. "Please let you disrupt everything I've built. Please let you confuse 3 5-year-olds who are finally stable. Please forgive you for choosing power over us. I didn't choose power over you. I chose power before I knew you existed. No." Her voice broke. "You chose power over me. The pregnancy just proves you would have chosen it over them too. Truth. Undeniable, devastating truth. He'd chosen his empire. Would have chosen it even with knowledge of their existence. Maybe not immediately, maybe not consciously, but eventually. When the pressure mounted, when the violence called, when being a father conflicted with being what his father built him to be, he would have chosen power. She saw it in his face. That's what I thought. She moved toward the door. "Goodbye, Minsok. Wait. No more waiting. I waited 6 years for you to come back. To prove me wrong. to show me that love was stronger than whatever darkness you thought you were protecting me from. She looked at him with eyes that had cried too many tears over someone who didn't deserve them. You never came. So I stopped waiting. And now? Now I need you to do the same. Stop waiting for a version of this that ends differently. What if I could change? You can't. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because you're standing here on your honeymoon, married to someone else, asking me for a second chance. She smiled sadly. That's who you are. That's who you've always been. Someone who wants everything, the empire and the family, the power and the love, without understanding you can't have both. The hotel hallway suddenly felt too small, too close, suffocating with truth. Their names, he tried once more. Please, just tell me their names. Amara looked at him for a long moment. Then she told him. And it broke him more completely than anything else possibly could. Kang Minho, Kang Jae, Kang Yara. She'd given them his last name. Even after everything, even after raising them alone, even after he'd destroyed her. She'd given them his name. Min-seok stood in that budget hotel hallway and felt something crack inside his chest. Not his heart. Hearts broke clean. This was messier. The sound of a man realizing he'd thrown away the only empire that actually mattered. Why? His voice barely worked. Why give them my name? Amara's expression held 6 years of single motherhood, 6 years of being both parents, 6 years of survival. Because they deserved to know where they came from. Even if where they came from didn't want them. I wanted them. I just didn't know. It doesn't matter anymore. She was already retreating into the room. You know their names now. You've seen them. That's more than you earned. Please, Min-seok, please just go. The door closed. He stood there until a hotel guest emerged from another room, looked at him strangely, and Min-seok realized he was a crime lord, crying in a budget hotel hallway at 2 a.m. He left, drove back to the villa in silence. Yuna was asleep, or pretending to be. He was grateful for it. He stood on the balcony until sunrise painted the Aegean gold and pink, thinking about 3 children named Minho, Jae, and Yara. Thinking about the woman who'd given them life and his name and everything he should have been there to provide. Thinking about the empire he'd built and the one he'd lost. His phone buzzed. Dawn messages from his second-in-command. Crisis resolved. Territory secured. Business as usual. His empire. Still standing. Still profitable. Still completely meaningless. You went to see her. Yuna's voice from the doorway. He didn't turn around. Yes. And she told me to leave. Smart woman. Yuna moved beside him, watching sunrise over water. Are you going to? I don't know. Silence. Then, my father once told me the difference between smart men and great ones. Smart men choose what benefits them. Great men choose what they can actually live with. And which one am I? That, Yuna said softly, is what you're about to find out. She left him alone with sunrise and impossible questions. 3 days passed. 3 days of pretending to be on honeymoon while his mind circled the same truth. He had 3 children growing up without him, and every moment he spent here was a moment he'd never get back. On the 4th day, he found Amara's hotel again. This time she was in the lobby. The triplets played in a small courtyard visible through glass doors, Minho serious and watchful, Jae laughing at something his sister said, Yara spinning in circles with pure joy. His children, living, breathing, real. Amara saw him. Didn't run, just waited. He approached slowly, like she was something wild he might scare away. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said quietly. I'm not asking to erase 6 years. I'm just asking for a chance, to know them, to try. You have an empire to run, a wife waiting, and 3 children who deserve better than my absence. Amara's eyes filled. They deserve better than confusion, too. Then let me prove I can be better. Not perfect, just present. She looked at her children through the glass. At Minho, who had his father's eyes and his mother's strength. At Jae and Yara, who'd never known what they were missing. 1 hour, she finally said. Tomorrow, the park 2 blocks from here. You get 1 hour to meet them properly. After that, we go home, and you figure out what kind of man you actually want to be. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a door. And this time, Minseok walked through it. Because some empires are built on power, and some are built on second chances you don't deserve, but fight for anyway. The crime lord who controlled half of New York stood in an Athens hotel lobby and chose, for the first time in 6 years, love over legacy. Tomorrow he'd meet his children. Tomorrow he'd try to be the father they deserved. Tomorrow he'd start building the only empire that ever really mattered.